Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me to present. How is my volume? Can everyone? Yeah. Anyone not here? No, that wouldn't. You wouldn't be able to answer that question, would you? This is going to be a slightly unconventional talk because sometimes I will leave gaps because I found that I can collect myself better if I leave a bit of silence occasionally. So if you bear with me if that happens and not think anything is wrong. I'd like first of all to talk about Janine Miller because Janine was my connection with the Theosophical Society here. Sadly she died August last year. She introduced me to two very important theosophists who have influenced my work considerably, Jeffrey Hodson and Cyril Scott. So I'm talking about them a little later. Janine felt that Helena Blavatsky, who is the instigator of the Theosophical Society, had been maligned by society, and her last book is an effort to rectify HPB's image in the eyes of the world. And that book is now available on a website to be read for free. It's called The Blazing Dragon of Wisdom. So I would encourage you. You all have references to websites and the program this evening if you need to refer to that. Now, having studied science at one of the most competitive schools in the country, Dulwich College, when I started reading about spiritual and esoteric matters, wrong word I know, I discovered that really science is really in its infancy in this planet. We have no idea about what esotericists call the higher energies. They're just as much a part of the universe as the matter that is sometimes trumpeted to be the only reality of things. And I found that my studies in this were very helpful in music because for me, healing and spirituality are very much to do with presence and intent. And presence and intent have a magnetic quality. They almost belong in physics. They're not really separate from the world of experiment, although of course the ultimate experiment is our own experience. Scientists often forget that. So that there is something like frequency that is much higher than solid, liquid, and gas, that is even more surprisingly part of us. Our emotions, thoughts, and intuitions are actually part of the universe to a much greater degree than society would have us believe. Descartes was a big problem because he claimed everything beyond the physical could not be investigated and therefore is imaginary, which is probably the biggest mistake anyone ever made in understanding. So this inspired me to really fork out on my own, and I felt that it was necessary to really go alone in music. There's no one really tutored me. I had some tutors, but I really had to find out for myself what music could do. I'd like to start with a piece called Harmonic River. This is a piece I recorded 16 years ago, and I'm going to add an extra layer of piano on top of it. But you must forgive me, I didn't have time to do a sound check. I'll have to do it very quickly now. Some people don't like to applaud because it chases the angels away, but I'll leave it up to you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a delight to play for you. Now, the SARS, I think probably it would be good not to applaud for the SARS because it's so quiet that the angels definitely will be chased away, maybe even before the end if you thought of applauding. So. Cyril Scott was a theosophist and also a composer. He was very well known in the 20s in Britain. I was very interested in Scott, both as a composer and also as an esoteric author. In fact, he has a chord that I'm going to use for one of the pieces later on the piano that was particularly characteristic he liked. He wrote a book called Music, Its Secret Influence Throughout the Ages, and in this book is a chapter called Music of the Future. And this, of course, is very interesting to me because he wrote this in 1933, and I was quite interested to see where he had a vision of where music would go. He made various predictions in this chapter. He said that music would bring people into closer touch with the devas or angels. Some of you might not believe in angels, but I'm sorry about that. For me, the reality, I sometimes am composing and it's as if something else is in the room assisting me, which makes several 100% difference in the result. And it feels like an external, but very sympathetic. Scott predicted Americans would be more able to move in this direction in composing. In fact, I left some sheets out at the door mentioning 11 composers who I think have to some extent fulfilled this vision that Scott had. He was writing in 1933 and things have changed a lot since then culturally. He predicted that composers would get in touch with cosmic currents of force and great floods of melody. And that's certainly something I have ambition to do. The music of the spheres is obviously a metaphor that is used a lot. But he said that the great cosmic symphony would be invoked. And one of the teachers of the TS founders said, this is back 100 years ago, "Today as we enter the new age, we seek primarily through the medium of inspired music to diffuse the spirit of unification and brotherhood, and thus quicken the vibration of this planet." So, a bit of a responsibility I felt there, but I've tried my best to compose in sympathy with this idea. Posterity will decide if I have. Geoffrey Hodgson is the other theosophist I'm particularly interested in. Later I'll be showing some images of paintings that were done of angels with his guidance. I particularly like Geoffrey Hodgson's description of how angels communicate with each other and how they communicated with him. They communicate in a way that all the senses are mixed together and synthesized. We've heard this term synesthesia, but this is to me it's a very fluid, dynamic way of communicating. And I feel very much it has a lot to teach us about the ideal way to be, to breathe, to live, and how to really communicate with each other, because there's so much scope and potential for more aliveness in our lives. And I think music for me has been one of the ways I've helped myself remind me. I did have a quote from Geoffrey Hodgson. What I've done with it? It's got lost. Anyway, I've told you the essence of what I feel about his descriptions. It's very moving for me to read his description of two angels talking to each other and how they exchange geometrical forms and colors and all sorts of things. Quite wonderful. Lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about what is healing, what is spirituality. I think the greatest healing is not about symptoms, it's about becoming more alive. We have a lot of talk about addressing symptoms in healing. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But to me, the most important thing is to become transformed and self-realized. That's the ultimate healing, and that's what I really see my music as for. There's a lot of images you can understand through. I think presence is very important. We all feel sometimes that when we're in an experience which is important, we are sharing presence, or we are being aware of presence, rather than just going through the motions of something very, very perfunctory. I think presence is very important, and music is very much part of that. For me, it's a way of sharing deep presence and helping people go into the deep silence. Very briefly, I want to talk about a French composer who died, 9 years ago, a man called Jean Catoir, and he's particularly interesting and may interest those of you who know a lot about Theosophy. He received his scores in the same way that Madame Blavatsky received her teachings. They appeared in front of him and he copied them down. It's very interesting. I had the good fortune to get to know Jean in my trips to France to meet him, and was able to transcribe his 43rd symphony for a synthesizer, so he was able to hear it before he died, which is very good because only one of his 70 symphonies was ever performed, and I hope we can arrange for more of that. I'd like to play something on the Turkish saz. In fact, probably play two things. Where'd my plectrum go? Oh, thank you very much. You keep track of things. I'm going to play two pieces. One is called Lotus, and the other one is called A Hymn to the Air. The second one's rather austere. I don't play it very often, but I figured that you people here could take that kind of thing. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to keep moving this back and forward because of the way we're recording this. So. Rupert Sheldrake has described my harmonic mathematics as a contemporary expression of the principles of Pythagoras. Pythagoras really is one of the foundation stones of mathematics and science in a way. He is reputed, and I think is quite likely, to have discovered the connection between number and harmony. And the work I've done in this area, with the help of students and friends, and software engineer Dave Snowden, who's actually here this evening, has been to explore how to explore the beauty of harmony in a very different way to the way it's conventionally done, which is simply chords and numerical harmony in music. I initially was inspired by a computer filmmaker called John Whitney, and he found a way of making very magical things happen with points on a screen or elements of an image. And I took this and ran with it, and I've developed a whole mathematics out of it, which I call harmonic maths. Lost a piece of paper here. Anyway, rather than, let me show you an example of harmonic mathematics. And bear with me while I tinker. There we go. Now, each point is moving at a different angular velocity, which is a fancy way of saying how fast it does one lap. And they're all going at very precisely controlled speeds. This can be done, of course, with a computer. We can have 30,000 points independently choreographed and calculated. This is a simple example to give you an idea of the magic of it, so you can see the principle and how it works in the other examples I have for you. The first thing I did back in 1983 is I created a sound where the points in the waveform, which you can do with digital sound, you can actually make the points in the waveform move up and down at different speeds. And that produced a rather wonderful sound, which has since become known as the UFO tone, which is this remarkable cascade of harmonics which goes on for about 45 minutes, which I won't play for you today. What you heard when you came in was a development of that, which I did a couple of years ago. You can hear harmonics that you couldn't possibly produce with a voice or an instrument with the digital sound. You see you get crystallization points happening here where, see there's a rather lovely one here when you get, that's a third of the way through the cycle. And the fraction of the way through the cycle you can see by the symmetry and the crystallization of the image. So this is a very dynamic way to produce visual sequences, and it can be applied to melody. In fact, I have applied it to melody, and tone as well. And color. Making color changes in this way appear very magical. You can see there's a 2 coming up. Anyway, you can explore it. It's rather nice. It reminds me of how one's thoughts become clear and then they dissolve into chaos again, and then they become clear again. It's a little bit like sort of existential take on one's state of mind. I fell in love with this back in the 80s, and I've been exploring every which way I can. I created orchestral music from it. I've done, with the help of Dave Snowden, we've created some wonderful graphics, which I'm hoping to show you more of, if I can fit them all in. I might have to stop this in a minute, because otherwise we won't get to the really good stuff. I'm going to have sound on here. I'm going to play triangles while we're watching this. Triangles is one of the first sounds that were made back in the 80s, which were developed by myself and a healer. And we sold several thousand of them by mail order in the 80s. They were quite innovative in those days because I was running a computer with 64K, so no one else could do that with 64K in those days. Everyone thought we were magicians or something. This is triangles, which is one of the... I know I shouldn't be speaking over here, and I'll get told off in a minute. This is triangles. And I could show you the video of that later if I have time. It depends how I deal with it. Isabel McGilfrey did a research project based on these sounds in the 80s. You can still buy the sounds and the books that we wrote about these sounds through one of my websites. You can buy them still. Here it is. So you get the idea that you have these crystallizations. I just wanted to show you the basic principle before showing you what we've done. I'm going to show you some of the work Dave and I did about 12 years ago. Can we have the lights a tiny bit lower? Just a tiny... That's no good for the video. Christian, is there a way to compromise?
We can't see your face.
No, we have to have the lights on, sorry. You can't really get the full impact, but you get... And you wait for the crystallization points, you'll see some very nice alignments going on with the shapes. While that's running, I'll talk a little bit about the project I did with Pete Townsend. Oh, thank you. Someone's being very thoughtful. Pete had a vision in the 70s that there could be a way to make the music of a person. In fact, he had this idea way back, and he even called the system called the grid. The internet hadn't been invented or coined then. He thought there was a thing called the grid that it could be done through. So he had a vision of this, and he asked me in 2003, could I do this for him? And Dave Snowden and myself worked for 3 years, and we produced a system online that would receive input from somebody, a photograph, a tapped rhythm, make a sound with a voice, and to make an instrumental sound. And this was fed into a program that Dave and I concocted between us with my guidance and his programming. And we produced 10,500 portraits between spring 2007 and summer 2008. And some of the results are rather lovely. I would have been proud to have composed them myself. Although in a way I did, really. I'll play one of them for you in a minute. These sounds I find particularly wonderful. Many times I've relaxed when I felt a bit depleted, and I can feel them massaging the inside of my body. They're very quite potent because they hit harmonics that we don't normally hear. They do some unusual and wonderful things. Pete's vision was that when we die, we get to find out how our music fits together with everybody else's, which I thought was a wonderful idea. And one of the things I created, although we've not released it yet, is this image of what it would be like if everyone were to hear their own piece of music. And eventually it turns into just silence or the sound of the universe. So I'm going to play you a piece called Vanya. It's actually my friend Vanya Silverton. This is what she got when she used the system that we put on the web to create musical portraits. So you can still hear it when it's gone. get more light. As you probably gathered, the method I use for creating the melodic vortices and the patterns in the music that this portrait system used was a harmonic mathematics. In fact, it was a rather wonderful coincidence that I worked on these melodic ideas with it in the 80s, and then it was after another 10, 15 years, I found a very big project to use it for. And one of the things that happened, I was helping Pete fulfill this vision he'd had some 35 years before. He, in turn, helped me record an album of my own music, which was based on some of the ideas we'd had in developing that system. And that's now a double album called Method Music with Nirvana Records, which you can get on Amazon and iTunes. I'd like to play you one of the tracks from that, which is called Victoria. I won't explain why it's called Victoria. It's for 2 harps, oboe, and organ. And I'm going to add an extra layer of music on the piano. So, hope you enjoy it. Now, the last part of my talk is not a talk, it's music. Because music is a way of dialogue, and you can't really say what music is. You can sort of catch the tail of it after it's passed by, but you can't really, it's really an experience. And I hope very much that as many of you as possible have very felt what I'm about with the music. I'm going to play a piano piece in 3 movements, which, and then I'm going to play some more saws. I need to switch over the video. For this piece, I have put together some of my photographs of water in nature. Some people think my music is quite water element-like, and I think the fluidity in it certainly I think is that way. I'm done with this file. Here it is. Sorry about this. Come on. It's not very professional, is it, to show what goes on a computer? Who cares? Same to you.
You're a bit of a magician, if I may say so. Apart from the obvious, of being a genius.
Don't know about either of those. Aspirations, maybe. It's going to be, watch the time now, otherwise I get in trouble. So this is Cyril. This is Cyril Scott's chord. It's a 1-4-7 chord. It's 2/4 back to back. Sorry, Mike. People often have, these are pictures I took. Some of them are very high magnification of water reflections on rivers and lakes. And they look like little beings, like maybe elementalists. I don't know. See what you think. Some of them. I'll play the chord first so you can see what the chord is, and then you'll identify it from what I play. I am going to play, well, you've got it in the program, an Indian raga scale, and then something on a conventional minor. Thank you very much. I mean, I spent the last 2 days preparing this, so the timing isn't perfect, but it's got some spontaneity in it, and that's probably better. I'd like to play one more piece on the saz, or maybe two if it's time, I don't know. This is a sequence sorry, Mike. It's a sequence of the David paintings that Geoffrey Hodgson commissioned Ethelwyn Quayle to create, and they're in his book Kingdom of the Gods, which is a wonderful book if you want to explore that region. This is called The Song of the Rose, and when I composed this, the room was flooded with the scent of roses, so I figured I should, I mean, not real ones, but spiritual ones. So I figured that it must be something to do with one of these characters. It's The Song of the Rose. This is called Water Wheel.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's a
That
great
was
pleasure.
excellent. I'll give you a proper vote of thanks at the end. Do we have any questions? Go on.
I was fascinated by your, I don't know how to put it, when you were playing that instrument, or the piano, were you trying to, in your mind, sync with the visual that was showing on the screen? Or is that a question? Is that a stupid question?
No, it's not a stupid question. Synchronizing sound and vision is something I'm very interested in. I didn't actually manage to show you one of the examples of that today, but something I would if I had managed to do it. But it's more mood matched than formation matched.
So, that syncing is not done with the system, because the system would be out of this world. It would be done through your mind.
That's an interesting and stimulating speculation. The way I do it is through the harmonic math can actually create a melody or a tone, and it can create an image at the same time that corresponds to that. So it is possible, but I wasn't actually. What I'll do now, I'll show it to you now while we're talking. You can see what. Why not? Excuse me a second. I hope that's part of the answer to the question. Triangles. Here we go. This was done in 1984. With the help of a young man who was then 16, who's now 43. Oh no, it's doing that. Oh my goodness me, how did that happen? No, go away please. Let's get QuickTime. Where's QuickTime? Sorry. There we go. So what you're seeing is what you're hearing. It's a waveform. Something I would like to do more of, but for the moment this is the best example we have of you're actually literally hearing that turned into a sound wave, but also rather beautiful. It reminds me of some ancient Peruvian designs. Sorry Mike, I'm messing up our recording here by moving around. This is one of those facts of life, I suppose. He doesn't mind. So, let's put the volume up a little bit here. Oh, there's no sound coming out of the, that's why. Sorry folks. Helps to connect it up, doesn't it? More questions?
Yes.
Yeah, I honestly don't even know where to start. I'll try to ask the question that's at the top of my head, but I'm glad I'm in touch with you artists in the virtual world, so we can continue.
Are you Brian?
Yeah.
Hi. He came from Poland to see this.
This might be too technical a question, but I like the sound of the piano compositions a lot, but does it ever frustrate you, the equal temperament of the piano and the fact that it's somewhat at odds with the harmonic maths concept?
Well, for a while I was following Terry Riley's example of experimenting with just intonation, which is where you have, instead of having all keys equally out of tune, which is the modern system of the piano and consequently other instruments, I've done some experimentation, sometimes using some of Terry's tunings, but I'm quite happy working with temper tuning too. I think ultimately music is in the soul and the psyche. It's not, doesn't necessarily have to be precision accurate in the real world. It can still give a model. Most of our modern harmonies, from, if you make the exception of atonality, most harmonic responses of composers echo the pure harmonic relationships, even if they're not exact. So they do hear them, and I'm sure people pick up on them. Debussy, for instance, with his ninths and 13ths. Yeah. So no, it doesn't frustrate me. Simple answer. Okay.
Follow-up question too. A lot of what you can do with a computer obviously is either very difficult or impossible to do with real performers, with live performers.
Sure.
I'm reminded of like Pavla Nankar, the piano composer who
Piano rolls.
such complicated polyrhythms that the only way he could realize it was to punch them into into the piano rolls and
Yes.
play them on the mechanical synthesizer, aka player piano.
Yes, yes.
And for instance, the Victoria piece cannot be performed live. How is that made? It's made with acoustic instruments, but I kept thinking, oh, this is so complicated. People try to perform it, they'll just get lost.
Well, Pete was encouraging me to get real players to play my music that was done in that way, but I wasn't convinced. I think, for me, when I write, and I've written almost 200 scores for players, you know, humans, and I like the ceremony and the ritual of people playing in the same acoustic space as the listener. I like that. I don't want to let go of that. The other world where I work in the cyber reality with very complex, beautiful, intricate rhythms that are absolutely precise, I like it because you can do things with that you can't do with human players, and vice versa. So I like both. Why not have both?
It's interesting you have two almost separate herbs of music.
No, they're not. Well, they've informed each other for several decades, so they influence each other a lot. They're not so separate as you might imagine. Yeah.
More questions?
So you get these nice alignments going on.
Well, this Pythagoras, Pythagoras was one of the great founders of mysticism and any esoteric, and number was significant, and that was one of the most important things.
Absolutely. I mean, we teach numbers as perfunctory nowadays. They become instruments, they become servants of thought. To Pythagoras, numbers were gods. They were archetypal beings. And I think one of the nice things about harmonic maths is it helps us to see the teeming sea of relationships that numbers are. It maybe gives us more of an aesthetic appreciation of numbers.
Number 7 was the most significant esoteric number 7.
That's deep stuff, yes. I mean, I would agree. And 3 as well.
Well, I said 7, 3, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You've got some of your music for sale tonight.
Yes.
Does that include the water images piece?
It doesn't include images.
So,
The piece I played is a spontaneous piece created especially for this evening with the Cyril Scott chords. It's not recorded, but there are, depends how much you want to get into it, but there's a lot of piano music. I've recorded over 4,000 piano pieces. So there's lots to explore, even if you don't have this one. Well, this one may be available, I don't know. We'll see if the recording is, if I play well enough.
The sound you're playing now, is it coming through those 4 speakers?
Two of the speakers.
Oh, two, oh, what, the one, the forward speakers? The ones, in other words, the ones in front, those speakers?
I think,
Just
yes.
those 2 speakers?
Yes, yes.
That is producing the whole sound, is it? Because it's like a it's almost like a surround sound.
Well, I've got 2 low frequencies that are very slightly out of tune, so you have a lot of phase beats going on, so it gives a kind of stereo effect. My dolphins would enjoy it.
Anyone else?
It's a single tone with 7 octaves of harmonics. You're hearing modulations of 127 different harmonics over the fundamental. So it's sounds that had never been heard before when I made these.
So it just remains for me to thank Lawrence very, very much. That was a fascinating insight and wonderful patterns and the joining together of the mathematics and the music and the elements, everything, the whole thing. So thank you very, very much for coming and sharing.